Hello and welcome back to the show again. Today we are joined by Abhishek Sudke, who is a public administration student at LSE and the founder of Project Statecraft. His journey spans from automotive engineering to global diplomacy. It is a fascinating case study with different career evolutions. And Abhishek, thank you for joining us. And we are very sure that the guests will learn a lot from you, including your insightful experiences as well as your detailed discussions around how you have gone through your academic journey.
Thank you, Kaushik. It's a great pleasure.
So let's just go right off the bat and start with some difficult questions as well in terms of how your origin story panned out. So I think at the beginning you held a Bachelor of Technology degree in automotive engineering from Vellore Institute of Technology. So what was this initial spark of interest in science, and then how did you experience that field, and what were your insights from there?
So I think when it comes to science and engineering, it goes as far back as when I was in like fifth grade, I think, or fourth grade. And there was this movie which had come up, which recently became quite famous, called Tara Rampam because of the Formula One movie. I think especially with the memes. So I think it was that movie watching the race cars, and the person I was most fascinated by in that movie wasn't the racing driver, but rather the person managing the car, building the car, and I think that is something which is stuck with me. And after that, my interests kept fluctuating in the realm of science and engineering itself. Like I really wanted to be an aerospace engineer, but unfortunately, I did not get a seat in aerospace engineering program. So I ended up going back to my true passion of automotive engineering and joining VIT.
Very interesting. I think there was a lot more in terms of your journey early on as well. But at some point, you started shifting from engineering studies to some other places and other fields as well. So you pursued a diploma in international relations and diplomacy. So, what prompted this growing interest in international relations and public policy while you were still studying engineering?
So the diploma itself wasn't as much of a start of the interest, but rather a step towards it. Because I think for me, the interest began even before I joined engineering, like as someone who was doing a lot of Model UN and was really, really interested in the debating aspects of it, the competition of it, the thrill of it. I think it started to turn into a huge passion when uh, I looked at the way it truly impacts people's lives, and that was did when I did my internship at Niti Aayog. Because I think until then, public policy, governance, international affairs, they were great things to talk about. They were great things to debate on, but uh, except UPSC, there wasn't really a career pathway that really existed. So it never really occurred to me that that this can be something which I could do for a living. And that changed when I did my internship at NITI, which was in the second year of my university. And I think to to my parents' dread, that's where things started to go wrong, and I shifted from away from my interest in engineering towards policy. And they had a tough time understanding it at the beginning, but I think they've come around and they really like what I do now.
I'm great. I'm very, very glad that that happens because I think parents become a very big roadblock in terms of doing pursuits apart from engineering in India at some point of times as well, though it differs a lot from house to house. But would you say that there's always like a lot of support or a lot of engagement where people can shift careers easily in these particular like colleges? Because I feel that there have been a lot of friends of mine who have studied a subject, wanted to shift, they have faced opposition from their homes, they've faced issues in terms of having access to information and all. So were there any unique challenges that you also faced when you were doing this?
No, definitely. I think it's not systemic. I think in this, the way the education system is itself structured, especially when you look at university education at the undergraduate level, it is extremely siloed. And like, I don't say this lightly, but it is more siloed than the government itself is, which is pretty bad to begin with. And that affects people because you're like 18, 19 years old, you're still figuring things out. And when you don't get that encouragement or that support from your family or from any network around, then it becomes quite difficult. I think for me, uh, it was an outstanding case. It was a case of privilege because I received a lot of support from the network that I had when I was at VIT. because coincidentally it wasn't just me in my batch of people, but a couple of other people as well who ended up going into the policy space after graduating from engineering, and all of us were friends. So all of us sort of knew that okay, this is something which we want to do, and we kept encouraging each other. I found great mentors along the way, especially the way I discovered that Niti Aayog had internships was from this one alumni of VIT who had come to VIT to give a seminar on why public policy needs engineers in the sector, and what kind of careers do exist in public policy, which is beyond just UPSC, which we are led to believe. And I think that was the eye-opening moment. Again, not very common, not systemic. It happened by chance, and I think that's where it started. So unfortunately, not a lot of people can do it. Like not just policy, but even many other fields beyond engineering. uh, Once you join, you it's quite difficult to venture out unless you have that support.
Very true. I think there are a lot of like intersecting fields as well. So as you were mentioning, if your senior came around and talked to you about automotive engineering and public policy, do you think that there were some like ideas or some places where you thought that both of your degrees sort of like melded together, or you had some amount of commonality where you could apply both places at the same time?
So it started that way. I remember this was back in 2019 when I had my um, a telephonic interview for the Niti Aayog internship, and I think you also have to be a little strategic when you're applying to these things, right? As someone who's studying automotive engineering, I can't get up and say that, you know what, I'm interested in law and I will apply to the legal team of Niti Aayog for an internship. Nobody's going to shortlist you. So I ended up applying to the transport division. It was called the infrastructure connectivity vertical then, because I thought, okay, that there is some commonality here. There is something for me to build off in terms of what I'm studying, what I'm doing. And I think it turned out to be incredible. So when the telephonic interview actually happened, there were a lot of questions around electric vehicles, ethanol blending, and in terms of autonomous vehicles, because I think these are the things which were considered to be the innovation part of policy back in 2019, because everybody was trying to figure out whether this is possible, and if it is possible, what kind of regulation do you need, what kind of policy do you need, especially with autonomous vehicles. So a lot of my interview was around that. The exposure to uh, model UN really helped, because one of the strong points which my mentor also thought was quite unique was me discussing about the importance of critical minerals and how the lithium supply chains are being controlled by China at the time, and that was something which was out of the blue, even like for him to hear from an engineering graduate, and he said, you know what, that this is something interesting. But it complemented heavily with my automotive engineering degree, because I was learning how to build electric vehicles. I was learning how to what kind of components go in, where do you get these things from. So definitely, it started with a lot of intersectionality, but of course, it went in a lot of different places after that.
So early on, I think there would have been some instances or some things that you would have read or experience you would have had, maybe a class or a news event or even like a book that you read that could make you become more passionate in the realm of governance and diplomacy. So was there any such specific incident that you remember very fondly from your early days?
Like, there's no specific incident. I think what as I said, like I was always passionate about it, because I could see how interesting the field itself was, how much there was to do. But when I was interning at Niti, I think that was the moment, and the if I have to pinpoint the one moment, I think it was um, us brainstorming about what the 100-day plan for the new government should be, because I joined Niti in 2019, the summer of 2019, which is when the new government had just come in with a massive mandate. And it was like, you know what, come in with ideas. What do you think we can do? And I think that's when I realized the true potential of working in public policy. And I thought, you know what, this is a field which can make a lot of difference. Things are moving quickly, things are moving rapidly. So let's work on that.
True. But I think there was also places where when we have spoken also you say that there's an importance towards cross-disciplinary resources being accessible, but also cross-disciplinary researches and approaches in problem solving being something which is approached a lot more. So with your unique backgrounds, as you were mentioning, there's always a lot to have discussions about. But how has this evolved over time, and how do you think that this impacts a lot of different sectors that you've viewed since then?
I think it impacts things significantly because at the end of the day, I think what policy needs to really affect is four things, right? The way you live, the way you move, the way you consume, and the way you progress in just your daily lives. Um, a lot of these things are around technology, and I happen to have the background in it. So uh, when it comes to understanding science, when it comes to understanding engineering, or when it comes to understanding any new technology that could be on the horizon, I think there's a very interesting way in which engineering graduates are taught to approach problem solving and to approach new things that come around. I think that's quite unique about engineering as a field itself, that it makes you want to be curious about the problems that you're seeing and not be scared of them. um, and I think that really helps because then the way I think about it is being multidisciplinary or being like cross-disciplinary is to truly have that single platform, which often is technology for me. And then you look at that, okay, what are the different ways it affects these four areas of life for the planet, for the people, uh, or for the future as well, right? So, and then it is about building on top of these by learning elements of different areas as well. And I think that's where uh, things like doing the diploma, my studies right now in public policy, like one of the big reasons why I wanted to uh, come back to studying and do my post graduation in policy was to do that, was to build that thematic understanding of the way you would approach problems in a specific area. And then you start connecting those dots and start to make sense, because at the end of the day, like I think what you need from policy is to make sense of so many different sporadic things that are just happening all around us. And that's the place where I think policy has also failed for most part, because that's where implementation breaks down, because you need to tell people how to implement a particular thing and what needs to be achieved. And unless that cross sectionality is figured out there, it is bound to fail.
Think there's a lot to have conversations around. There were a lot of points in which, when we were going through the COVID 19 crisis as well, there were a lot of other issues as well, where we faced these issues, where cross disciplinary researches were not really something that were predominantly accepted in certain areas. But there is a huge potential and need for it from time to time. But if people don't really collaborate, people don't really talk, the shared futures that humanity has in general, also the effects that things like climate change or social narratives have, there's no dialogue, then there's no conversation point, there's no exchange of ideas, no exchange of technologies. So I think that does give a lot more problems in terms of how the world is operating. And this leads us to a very nice segue into our next segment as well, when we talk about global health and how you started your own project, in terms of Project Statecraft. So your journey took a significant turn towards public health, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic, and where you also started working around this new organization that you founded, Project Statecraft. So let's talk a bit about that. So it seems that you started work on a project called Path. If you could just let us know a bit about what this project was about before we discuss a bit more about how your journey was throughout this.
So while both of these things were happening at the same time, I think I was living sort of double lives during it, and ever since then I have lived double lives. Sometimes they're triple as well. So let's take the path part first, right? So I think COVID-19, like as for everybody, it was completely unexpected. I was in my third year of engineering. We were told that this is like a flu. You're going to be back in like a couple of weeks, so you just need to go home for now. And that turned out to be a year and a half. Was 2 years. So that was, I think, something which was quite incredible, because nothing of that sort had come around before. Being at VIT, being involved in a lot of debate competitions, a lot of model UN, a lot of the thing like at at Model UN Society itself at VIT, I was constantly training juniors. We were having these learning exchanges among ourselves. And I think that played a huge role in how I ended up in policy as well. And suddenly it all came to a halt. So uh, I think that was something which was very difficult to start with. And I think a lot of people relate with that because it was a sudden change for everybody. Um, and as I had a lot of free time on my hand, I started writing. And while I was also writing, it wasn't enough. We still needed to figure life out because at the back of the head it was still that okay, this is a few weeks thing, and we still got to do what we got to do. Like we got to look for a job, we got to have an internship. And in VIT, the final semester is usually an internship along with a capstone project. So I applied to a lot of internships. I got into Path, which is a global health nonprofit. Uh, at the time, it predominantly worked in health technologies. Um, as after I joined, I think I was given a very low priority project, which was looking at this report that had come from China on oxygen infrastructure, because this was still during the first wave when the oxygen crisis wasn't as big a deal, and as the cases most of the times that policy and government programs are uh, respond to crisis and not prepare for them. Nobody was really paying much attention to this. So a project was given off to me that, okay, you know what, study this report, and why don't you just make a presentation to the team about this? I studied the report. A week and a half later, I gave a presentation in terms of what the gaps exist in India, what is there to learn from that report, what are the things that have been done well, and then it was left off. Um, Couple of weeks later, the oxygen crisis unfolded. There were there were thousands of people dying because there was lack of oxygen, and all of a sudden, Path was at the forefront as one of the organizations which had worked globally on oxygen significantly. So that Path had done significant work on respiratory care management globally until that time, especially in Asia, uh, predominantly in China, as I was mentioning before, but nothing had happened in India yet. But neither had any of the other organizations. So Path was sort of in the pole position to do something about it. We were already working with a lot of state governments for different projects, and then they remembered that, okay, you know what, there is this one intern who had given a very good presentation on this, so why don't we bring him in and see, and he can help us out with a lot of things. And by then I'd worked on a couple of other projects as well. I was drafting proposals at Path, which was a phenomenal experience. I think I got to work with some incredible mentors, and they're still my mentors, and amazing people that I keep meeting whenever I get a chance, and they kept giving me more interesting projects. So by that time, it was the base of that multidisciplinary cross sectionality part had started to build in, where I was thinking that, okay, you know what, that there's this maternal, newborn, and child health project, which was utilizing these something called SNCUs and NICUs, which are these newborn intensive care units, and that requires oxygen as well. So can we reverse engineer this this thing? Like, how did we come about getting oxygen to NICUs safely? And that kind of unfolding of problems was something which really worked out. And it wasn't just with me, but there was a huge team that I got to work with at the time. And all of us got into this mission mode to apply to uh, design as many different projects as possible, set up these technical support units for COVID war rooms, which were specifically dedicated on oxygen support. And it was a fascinating experience because at the beginning I was doing this daily reporting that needed to happen because it was a crisis situation, and uh, we were working with we were working on a USAID project. So we had received some USAID funding for as an emergency grant, to set up oxygen infrastructure. And as part of that, we also had to report on how much progress we were making on a day-to-day basis. So it was reporting daily, it was building those weekly reports, monthly reports. And I think anybody listening who's from the development sector has worked on USAID projects knows how rigorous the reporting for USAID projects is, and understandably so, because the whole thing needs to be justified to the US Congress, to the American people, was needed to be justified in the past tense, unfortunately. But yeah, like, I think it was an incredible experience because I just got to work on so many different projects, and by the end, we were looking at how do you make this oxygen generation. So then we started setting up these oxygen generation plants in hospitals because you cannot centralize oxygen production in a country as big as India, because building that kind of a logistics network is a phenomenal task, and we tried to do that as well successfully within a few states too. But the massive drive, especially from the PMCares fund, was to uh, build these oxygen generation plants in hospitals. So we were building these oxygen generation plants, and by the end of the third wave, it was that okay, these are consuming too much electricity. So we need to green these so that there is less energy consumed. And then I started to move into the energy transition, and that's when I got introduced to the climate space. And I thought, okay, this is fascinating. And now I'm really really interested in the climate space. So I think it's things build on top of one another from out of experience, and it's fascinating how it has turned out.
Very interesting. I think you would have managed a lot of different modalities as well. So, did you find anything unique when you were talking about different states? Because interstate cooperation and interstate development projects, and also other things where one organization at the center is working with so many different governments, so many different institutions, they all often face a lot of problems and challenges. So, was there anything especially noteworthy there when you said you were working with PM Cares? You said you were working with USAID. These are governmental organizations in association with an organization like Path. So, was there any challenges or other things that you especially faced during this period?
No, definitely. I think one of the big transitions was from the COVID phase and to non-COVID phase, because COVID phase, especially working on oxygen, it was emergency. Like people's lives were at stake. So state governments and the central government was collaboration was really really seamless. But after that, that really wasn't the case. And I think one really and that's very understandable because of the federal structure that that we do have, because health, education, nutrition, these are state subjects. Like state governments primarily take up responsibility for these. So I think the kind of project that I was working on, where we had funds that were available, that were ready, and we had to go and set up infrastructure, was relatively a lot more straightforward. But in the next phase, uh, or like sort of during it and transitioning into the next phase, we also wanted to uh, start digitally tracking the way oxygen generation was happening, oxygen was being provided. And I think that's where the challenges also started to come in, because then states don't want to share the data a lot of the times. And then you run into the problem that okay, but there is this, it's a central government sponsored project. So that data needs to be given out. So we started to get a lot of data on oxygen generation plants, but not as much data on cylinders, um, because that data was not available. Setting up that infrastructure was quite challenging, and the state governments just didn't want to do it because they're like, if we just have to give this data to the state, then why would they do it? Not put in those terms, but I think that's where it came from. So I think what I realized at the time is when there is a crisis situation in a federal structure or in any structure, there is a little bit of sovereignty power that one of the one of the two powers gives up for the betterment of the people. Um, but when it's business as usual, that doesn't happen. Um, and I think we can get into a huge philosophical debate about whether that should happen or whether that shouldn't happen in terms of when it's business as usual. But yeah, like I think that's where things start to get difficult, start to get challenging. And if we could come up with more resilient systems that can manage this power dynamic better, then I think that could be brilliant. Because at the end of the day, like what makes India's democracy truly democratic is the federal structure of it. But at the same time, we're a developing country. We want to provide to people as well. So that trade-off really shouldn't exist. But solving it is something that no, we haven't figured that out yet.
I think there's also like a lot more like issues in terms of collaborativeness between government bodies, and I think that is something which you really clearly highlight. Let's just move on to the next question. Then I think there was one portion where we saw that you worked with Access Health International. So what was your work around this around, and what were the implications of research that came from it? Because I believe that after that you've also written certain reports, and from that work also you've done a lot of other publications as well. So what was this journey like?
So I think by the time it was uh, by the time I was ready to leave Path after having spent around 2 years around 2 years there, I had started actively working with a digital health team because I had helped I'd helped pilot the digital health tools first, design trainings around it. To pilot the digital health tool, we set up this whole learning management system to teach people how to capture data on oxygen. How do you really use this new equipment like oxygen concentrators? And we were trying to do things more and more digitally. I think digital was something which was really picking up my interest at the time. Um, I loved how the amount of scope that existed when it comes to digital technologies because we had seen that. The moment we moved away from an analog way of implementing the Oxygen project and moved towards the digital, the pace at which we could apply things, the visibility that we started to get was just incredible. And I think doing that for health system as a whole was something which was really fascinating. And that's when this opportunity from Access Health came around to work on this project that brought together digital financial solutions in healthcare. And that was really fascinating for me because one, I had never worked on something like that before. I didn't know a lot about it, so that was something which ticked off my engineering brain that okay, this is quite cool. Let's try and figure this out. And it was also an international project where I was working with stakeholders across 6 different countries. So it was great exposures, and that's when I forayed into it. So it was primarily a consulting role when I was working with Axis, and I started to work on this white paper, which was on how do you bring financing technologies to promote primary healthcare better and what are its benefits. Um, the report went fantastic. Again, I met a phenomenal mentor there as well, who continues to mentor me. We work together on a lot of projects projects now, and it was something of a huge revelation for me because health financing or financing as a whole space itself opened up. Because until then, I had worked on implementing programs, tracking programs, reporting on them, designing them. But how do you really fund them beyond uh, just getting a grant or beyond just taxing people was something which was quite new to me. And that's when this space of um, how do you really come up with like these interest-free loans? What are these digital savings? Why these things matter? Um, what kind of role digital payments can play when it comes to creating the trail on the back end that can then allow people to access credit, uh, microcredit in a lot of cases, and credit as well, was something which was really interesting. And working on the report was phenomenal because I got to speak with people from many different backgrounds. The report itself was structured in such a manner that my mentor who was leading the project, she wanted to make sure that this white paper is truly applicable. So we were speaking with startups, we were speaking with regulators, we spoke with banks, we spoke with insurance companies, we spoke with governments, we spoke with a lot of bigger health tech companies, smaller health tech startups to really try and figure out what is it that we can do. And while drafting the report, there was also a special interest group that Access was running on the FinTech for Health project, which monthly we conducted a learning exchange session virtually, where we sent an invite to all of these stakeholders that we were speaking to come on board a call and hear some health tech companies or some fintech companies present their solution, and then moderate a discussion around that. So it was something which was fascinating to learn, and fascinating to see that so many people were also getting interested in this. So I also got to attend a lot of those. I was then writing regular reports on these special interest group meetings that were happening. We ended up doing this in-person conference as well, um, by the end of my time at Axis, and that is that's something which has taken off brilliantly, because today you can get interest-free loans on your medical expenses. The digital integration that now exists in terms of your bank statements, especially because of UPI from your trail, that is allowing so many people to access credit for their medical expenses, and also helping them pool money together as savings for the future. And it's a massive space today. um, and I'm really glad that I could be part of it as it was all coming together. So a very, very fascinating journey with Access as well, a completely new area.
I think there was a fascinating discussion here as well in terms of how these things apply in the public policy sector, because at the end of the day, we are looking at how academic inclinations led your perspective and also how your journey through these things went away. But I think one very fundamental movement also occurred here when COVID-19 pandemic occurred. I think, as regrettable as the pandemic were, you got some opportunities, and that culminated into you going into this idea of founding Project Statecraft in May 2020. So as just a holistic picture, what did Project Statecraft mean to you? What inspired you to it, and why did you start it?
Okay, so I think now we're doing the second part of my double life. So I think as I was mentioning, I think one of the things which was truly irking me once the lockdown started was that I couldn't do what I was doing as part of the Model UN Society from back in VIT. And so I thought that, okay, one of the ways to try and still stay connected to what I care about is to start writing. I started a blog, and it started getting a lot of traction. Some of my other friends also started to write, and then one day I thought, like, okay, why don't we all just write together? And it can be something like a think tank, right? We're all thinking together, we're all writing together, and we're all putting it on a single website. So I think it's pretty straightforward. So it could be a very cool thing to do, and it would give us an opportunity to also reconnect with a lot of people that we were regularly interacting with through the Model UN conferences, through debates. And that happened because at the beginning, so when we started Project Statecraft, and Shivank, me, and Akshay, we started Project Statecraft, and we sent out the first call for volunteers that, what, that we're doing this. Most of the people who applied were our friends, and we thought, okay, that this is great. Like, we haven't told these people to, like, we didn't have to pester people to come and write for us. Like, people do really want to write for this. Um, and I think for us, the idea that we want to make this youth led, that we want to make this non-partisan, was what really drove people, because I think that was the time when media started to. I wouldn't say media started to get partisan. I think people started to notice that it was getting partisan, and it was very annoying. It has just gotten more annoying now, but it has started to get really annoying, and everybody could tell that, okay, there is partisanship, there is some media outlets which are partisan towards one way, there's some media outlets that are partisan to the other way, and where is where is the unbiased stuff coming from? We also tried to publish, by the way, like we sent some of our articles to some of these media outlets, and they didn't think it was spicy enough. And that's when we thought that, okay, this is annoying. We don't want to do this. So why don't we put together a website? And I think that's what people related with. People thought that, okay, there are young people who want to write, who want to build a think tank together. And I think we were the first youth-led think tank in India at the time. It's amazing how many different initiatives and startups and non-profits have come up after that, who have done this in a lot of different ways, in incredible ways, in ways that, I wish we had done things, but still know that we couldn't. Uh, and yeah, like I think it started as a way for us to put our research on a platform and help people read it. Um, I think it grew because people really thought that this is something that they can relate with. And everybody had a lot of free time through the lockdown as well. So people were excited to write, and they were constantly writing too. So that's how Statecraft started.
Very true. I think we can discuss Statecraft some other time as well. I think we'll invite you once more in terms of discussing the workings of Project Statecraft as well for some of our other channels where viewers could get a more insightful measure into what Project Statecraft is. So let's just move to the next segment. That I think there has been a lot of discussion around your early work, how you transitioned from being an engineer to say a public policy enthusiast and to working in the public policy field. I think there's also like a huge culmination to these chain of events. You went ahead and then worked in high level policy roles as well, and you've also done your master. So let's just discuss things in like sequence there as well. So your pathway led you to like a high level role in terms of India's G20 Sherpa meeting. This would seem like the perfect combination of how your interests like aligned with things, and then also how you culminate into the space of policy and diplomacy and global affairs. So I think the first thing that we can possibly discuss is, what did you do as a policy officer here?
Well, so before we get to policy officer, I think a bit of context in terms of how I also ended up getting there, because I think I've received questions from so many people now that, okay, like how do you really start working with Sherpa, right? I think for me it was having a very unique background and at a very opportune time as well, and with the right people at the right place. I think again, like luck played such a huge role, and so did the privilege of knowing a lot of people. So after I interned at Niti, the mentor that I interned under, who was the young professional at the time, Siddharth Sinha, he also went on to join Mr. Amitabh Kant at G20 Secretariat as when he joined there as the Sherpa, and Siddharth was his chief of staff over there. I decided to, and I kept in touch. So while that was still back in 2019 that I had interned under him, like still it was around October 2022, September 2022, when everybody also started to find out that G20 was going to happen. Um, I wrote to I wrote to the Ministry of Youth Affairs that I want to be involved in Y20 in some way. If there is any way, if there's a volunteering thing, I would love to be. I never heard back from them. And then I saw this post where Siddharth had joined G20, and I thought, okay, like I am in touch. Why don't I go meet him and see what this is about? Maybe there is a word that I can try and put in to see if I can get involved into Y20. And when I met Siddharth, who was gracious enough to invite me to the office and actually hear me out, talk to me about the work that we were doing. I think at the back of my head it was that, okay, if this were to be a job interview, uh, what would I want to say? I know it isn't. It's just a casual meeting. But if it was, what would I want to say? And there was a list of things in my head that I wanted to talk to him about, tell him everything that I had been up to. And because India's G20 presidency was happening immediately after Indonesia, where they had constituted the pandemic fund, operationalization of the pandemic fund was something which was yet to happen. So I knew that that could be something which could be on the agenda, and on top of that, there could be other things as well because India being India, of course, wants to do tremendous amount of things. UPI had picked up, so I definitely knew digitalization and digital public infrastructure was on the agenda. Um, and and by then I had also completed the diploma, so I also wanted to sort of think about okay that there is multilateral reforms, things like this, which India had always pushed for at every multilateral forum. So I knew that when it comes to India holding the presidency themselves, I think every single thing that India until that point had advocated for at multilateral forums is going to be at the forefront, and they were, be it the initiative on lifestyle for environment, which was uh, which was around green living, sustainable living, or be it the focus on global south and on the issues of climate justice. So everything was going to be on the agenda. And I think the idea was that okay, let's go prepared. Like, let's at least know what they want to do. The meeting went incredibly well. By the end of it, there was a discussion that okay, would you like to come and work here, and how can that be made possible? I remember doing this little dance when I left from there. Because I tried to be really nonchalant through the whole thing. But yeah, like I think it was incredible to have received that opportunity in that time, because what they wanted someone to do was to come in and help Sherpa do the like give Sherpa the research that is required on the back end, because uh, uh, Mr. Kant being Mr. Kant, I think he structures arguments, ideas in the most phenomenal way and presents them in the most incredible manner that anybody could. But there is a whole machinery and a whole team that works on the back end to uh, to work with him, and to whom he can throw questions, and they have to come up with solutions, ideas, research behind it to try and support it. And he told me that okay, this is going to be the main job. You know, you have to try and do this. And I thought that okay, that this is great. Again, never done it before. Um, I genuinely felt like you said that things were falling into place, like life was coming full circle. Despite being interested in international affairs, being interested in public policy, ever since Niti, where I was an intern, I didn't really get to directly work on policy or global affairs. Like I was working in social impact and development, but I thought that okay, this is an incredible opportunity to work on something which could like truly be which could be really impactful. And I was always so starry-eyed for Mr. Kant when I was an intern. Like a few days ago, I like this picture came up on my Google Photos that I had taken on in one of the meetings, and I was sitting on the far end of the table, and I was clicking pictures of him from the meeting. And I think it was incredible to then end up day to day, every day, sit in front of him across a table where he was asking us questions, and we were doing research on the things that he was telling us about. We were sitting in meetings with him, uh, with incredibly important people. Some incredible things were being discussed as well. Uh, and to go back after that meeting, unpack it, come back with a coherent analysis of what was discussed. What is there something that can be done, that needs to be done, that should be done? Um, and it was a whole different experience of working. I think every day was different. Every day was fascinating and power packed. Uh, and yeah, like the amount of learning that I got from Sir at the time as well was amazing, because he has such a huge energy around him, that you can't not be prepared when you're going in to meet him. So I think that was something of a charged experience for me. And I wish more people in the government were like him, honestly, because as for as many young professionals we have today, I think if everybody got an experience like that, we would have an amazing workforce.
I think that's very insightful as well, because I think working in a way in which it makes it satisfactory is something which is very important in discussing different dynamics and how things would be better off for you. But I think there were also some very key insights into how like this journey unfolded for you, unpacked for you, and I think that would be very insightful for people who are looking to work in this space as well. If not particularly in the G20, but at least in some place or the other, and some time in the future. But I think there would have also been quite a lot of like challenges and rewards of supporting multilateral negotiations. I mean, you did not work directly in these, but you were there in terms of the backroom team, so you knew how to research these ideas which were being presented in these teams. So, what were these unique like things that you expressed, um, and you also like got an insight into?
I think it was a whole range of things, to be honest. Like one of because the working directly with Sherpa allowed like opened the doors to a lot of meetings that otherwise wouldn't happen for officers who are as young as me and one of my other colleagues. But he always gave us that platform to do that. And once and after you enter into the room, I think it's a lot of all of it is listening because you rarely speak there. But I think afterwards on the back end, our team was actively contributing to the declaration because Sherpa himself was writing the declaration as well. So it was bringing in a lot of new ideas. So one of the ideas that I loved that we could bring in was around climate and health. So the intersection of climate change and health systems was something which was gaining traction in the context of pandemic preparedness at the time, but it wasn't really discussed anywhere beyond that. Or like there was definitely causation that people understood, that people were like, yeah, yes, climate change is also causing health problems and health sector is also contributing to climate change. But what do you really do about it? Was something of an enigma for everybody even then. And that's when we took up the project under un, uh, under the Sherpa's team took up the project directly, where we started working with the Asian Development Bank, and we came up with these high level principles on what exactly can we do as part of climate and health. Uh, 9 months later, through the presidency, we got these high level principles adopted by the health working group. They also found a mention in the leaders' declaration, and I think ever since then, the space has blown up. A year later, at COP, there was a dedicated day for health. Uh, Now at the COP that is happening in Brazil, the COP that's going to happen in Brazil also has a dedicated day, or like I think 2 days for health. And everywhere, and people started to recognize that climate and health was something which is really really important. And I think that was a huge huge moment personally for me. One of the other moments which was amazing, which was quite interesting, and not really academic in that sense, but was when the Chandrayaan landing was taking place, and I suggested that why don't we live share the Chandrayaan landing and take a break while the landing is happening from the negotiations, because we were in these virtual negotiations for 12 14 hours every day. Um, this was from August onwards. This was from July onwards. I think that was when the Chandrayaan landing was also taking place, and the Sherpa was very happy to do it. And after that, after the landing was successful, I think every country's representative who spoke after congratulated India. Some of them went on to add words about how uh, amazing it is to see a developing country do this and to constantly do it, because it was an incredible feat what we achieved. And I loved how much pride I felt in that moment. So yeah, I think these are the two, one more formal and the other less formal sides of being at G20. but beyond that as well, I think there was just so much that we could do. As I said, every day was different. So uh, ranging from climate resilience and public health to digital transformation, multilateral reforms, gender equality, because the gender equality section of the declaration that uh, we came up with, and that uh, the Indian presidency negotiated, also was the most ambitious uh, gender equality multilateral document since the Beijing Declaration. Uh, and it was so amazing to hear a lot of the Western countries praise India about us taking that step forward, and to acknowledge that care economy is something that needs to be spoken about. Unpaid care work among women is something that needs to be spoken about. That there has to be a concerted effort towards towards achieving towards achieving gender equality in the digital economy space. And these were things that we were all conceptualizing in the room, and to see them passed was I think I have no words for how amazing that felt. So yeah, I think G20 as a whole was a great experience, and it is all thanks to Mr. Amitabh Kant again. Like, it is very rare that bureaucrats and leaders at such a senior level give an opportunity to young talent, and he's been known to do that over and over again throughout his career. So, so yeah, I think that was G20 in short for you and the audience.
Very, very insightful. I think that was a very nice recap into how things panned out in your journey as well, which could be very like helpful for people. So let's move on to the last couple of segments. I think firstly, let's just discuss a bit about your current role in the Masters of Public Administration at the London School of Economics. What got you into this? What is your next journey like, and what are you going to go ahead and do in the future?
See, this is the most difficult question. You were lying when you said that we are going to do the difficult questions at the start. Um, so I think after G20 ended, I knew I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to study public policy academically, and truly learn what these things mean, from the best that is out there. And I got into LSE to do that, and I came in with a clean slate. So I'm still only halfway through the journey. So there's still one more year. I'll be leaving for London in a few weeks. So, but I joined the first year of my master's degree as a clean slate because I thought that okay, there's a lot of different things that I've done while I study public policy and public administration academically. I also want to try and figure out which are the areas that I want to dedicate the next 5 or 6 years to and work actively towards them. And of course, throughout these 5 years and everything that we discussed, Project Statecraft has been something which has run parallel to all of this, and it's a journey as a whole, as well. But I think from it, what I like from the intersection of that and public policy, what I truly want to do moving ahead is also try and work in the educational research space. Look at how the future of work, education, and uh, economic inequality are linked together, and what can be done in order to take us into a better place than what we are in right now. Again, a lot of different things also affect these three things that are interlinked. The threat of climate change affecting livelihoods, affecting health, and affecting the way our lives are moving across all of across every area also affects this trio. So that is something which I am really, really fascinated by, and I would want to study it more in detail. But at the same time, I think we're living in at such a drastic period of history. Um, our generation has seen a pandemic. We have seen wars. Uh, we have seen some horrific things. We've also seen some incredible things which have massive potential like AI, and how resilient a lot of the global economy has been through this whole thing. Like we are, despite what we have in the White House, we are still in a decent shape. The earth isn't completely foregone, but at the same time, we are also at a turn of a big risk. And I think at the end of the day, it's the lives of people and planet that is going to get affected significantly. And if we aren't able to fix the way we educate our younger generation, the way they earn their livelihoods, and how their mobility, uh, their social mobility isn't seamless, then every other thing starts to get much more worse than it already is. So we might not have answers to like the biggest things that are out there. Like we might not solve climate change. AI might truly take over. But through it all, if we have a less unequal society, if we have a better educated and people who are able to earn who are able to earn a living wage to have a dignified life and to have resilience against the challenges that we face, I think that will still be a better life than what we came in with. So I think that is something which I would like to do. Again, it is not super focused, so I think the next year is going to be dedicated to figuring that out. At the same time, in the coming year, I'll be serving as the head of advocacy at the Gender Equality Network, also spelled WOMXN network, uh, at the School of Public Policy, and that is a whole that is a whole area which I have been fascinated with ever since I worked on the gender equality section of the G20 declaration that we worked on. And there's just so much that needs to be done over there as well. So I think there's a lot of these overlapping fields which do exist that I would like to have a career in. Again, what kind of a career, where, it's something to figure out in this year. Um and there are some incredible things that we are doing at Project Statecraft as well, that have picked up incredible momentum this year, uh, which I think would continue to take more pace in the coming year as well. There's some very cool new projects which I want to work on in the data space and in the educational research space, which I'm working on with a couple of other people. So I would also like to see how they go in the coming year. But yeah, I think I'm really excited to go back and see how the second year of my master's program goes.
That's very, very true. And I think there's a lot to explore as well. And it's always good to have that sort of leeway in terms of transitioning between different ideas and different spaces, because you can't really be somebody who's always restrictive in the idea of intersectionality, in the idea of researching on intersections. Let's just do this last segment of a completely rapid fire up where we wrap up with a few glimpses. So, which will probably give us more about your personal insights and advice. So, question one: what is one book or resource that you would highly recommend to anybody who is interested in public policy or international development, and why?
So there's a book called Range. Like it's not specifically for anybody who's interested in international development, but I think everybody just needs to read that book. And that book is inspired this intersectionality worm in my head a lot, and being multidisciplinary as well. So Range is would definitely be that one book.
Great. So, what's the key takeaway or piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's going into this sector or who is interested in a non traditional career path like yours that merges diverse fields?
Be bold, speak up to everybody that speak up in every room that you can, and don't ever burn bridges. Like keep your connections close. Make sure that you are kind to people, and most importantly, make sure you're kind to yourself. Because I think in policy, for all the things that I did tell you, like there were like 50 different things which didn't work out. because that at the end of the day in policy, that's the name of the game. Most things that you plan, that you research, that you want to do will not happen because they are politically or economically or socially or culturally unfeasible. And that's okay. Like, you have to be kind to yourself to accept that it's okay to that not every idea of yours will see the light of the day. And I think that's something which I've learned in the last couple of years.
What is one thing about your work, whether at Project Statecraft or at G20, that most people would find surprising?
I didn't sweat it out. I think people a lot of the times they really think that it is very, very difficult to do, that this is something which I might not be able to do, or it would just require so much. It really doesn't. I think as long as it drives you, it feels really easy. And if you're passionate about it, you don't really get tired, you know. So I think I think people would find surprising.
So, last question then. What, where would we be able to find you? Where would our listeners and viewers be able to find you and learn more about your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or like, I think LinkedIn is probably the only way you could find me. Again, you can follow Project Statecraft. Half of what I do is what Project Statecraft does. So uh, that's another place where you can find me. I constantly engage with the members at PAC. I lead a few teams at PAC. There's a huge alumni network that we have where we are trying to do a lot of interesting things. You can find me interacting with people there as well. Um, so yeah, except that there's a Substack that I run, which I'm trying to get it active. So you can definitely check that out. There is any research that I cannot put via PSC because Project Street Out is a non-partisan. Uh, I put there because at the end of the day, I do have partisan views. So, but I think there is sanctity of Project Street Out as a non-partisan platform that needs to be maintained, which is why I don't publish everything that I write or think there. So I think that could be the other place where you could find me.
Again, that brings us to an end. Abhishek, thank you so much for coming on board and discussing your insightful academic journeys and what your future holds for you. We're very sure that people who are listening in or viewing us would be able to gain a lot of knowledge from whatever you discuss.
Thank you so much, Kaushik. Like, this was a refreshing conversation. You don't get to revisit a lot of the older stories often. So it was really, really nice to do that. At the same time, it was always so lovely to talk to you, and the conversation was really, really seamless. So love that. I really hope that people get something as well, and if nothing else, I hope you get entertained in some way from this. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, and would love to be back.
Thank you so much. We're glad to have you back as well.